after a short hiatus. We had Mother's Day, which threw us off. But then, let me tell this little story because this is you didn't know anything about it, which was kind of funny. So, about a week ago, I was scheduled for some oral surgery. I had an impacted molar, an impacted wisdom tooth actually, that has been lying dormant, like a long dormant volcano for decades, and had finally started acting up recently, causing me a lot of misery and discomfort. So, went ahead, had the surgery. It was a little nerve-wracking because I don't respond well to anesthetics, and this was general anesthesia, so I went completely under, which is an amazing thing to do. I was talking to the doctor, and I didn't even feel like I went to sleep. I was talking, and I just kept continuing talking. And he just thought, hey, you're done. You know, try not to talk so much. So I got up. It's starting to wear off. I'm a little woozy. And Becca's there. She's going to drive me home. Now, this doctor's office is probably 3 or 4 miles away from the house. So we start driving. And we're about a half mile from the house on Broadway. It's a long straight road. And she's heading south. Another car is heading north. The northbound car just turned out of the blue. No turn signal, no indicator. And the weird thing was, normally when she's driving, I never lay the seat down. I'm always up and alert. But because of the anesthesia, I laid the seat back. So I didn't see anything. All I felt the impact. Well, no, the sequence of events was I heard her scream. I felt an impact. The airbags went off. And then she continued to scream and yell. And I kind of sat up and realized something was amiss and decided to get out of the car as quickly as I can because growing up in the age of the 60s and 70s, I thought the car would just explode because on TV that's what happens. Car gets hit, then it explodes. You know, just like on the Mod Squad or Adam 12. So I get out of the car, I just kind of fall out because I don't have all my faculties yet. And I'm just screaming expletives. I'm going to try to keep this family friendly. What the F? What the F? I'm just disoriented, looking for her. She's bleeding. She had cut her hand when the airbag went off. The big plastic piece flew out and just cut her hand up. So she's bleeding and screaming. I'm yelling, what the F, what the F? The driver of the other car came over. He's like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. I was watching them. The city was purging the fire hydrants, and he was captivated by that. So he's watching that, making the turn, and not even looking for oncoming traffic. So, bang! And we're probably about a block from the police department, less than a block, walking distance, and a block away from the fire department. So by the time I kind of got my bearings, there were cops, firemen, an ambulance, and a tow truck there within minutes, unless there was some type of time compression because of the anesthesia, which I don't think there was. They hustled us both off into the ambulance and took us to the hospital. Wasn't even able to get information. I couldn't even tell you what kind of car we had. Got to the hospital. They're checking her out. They're checking me out. I had bumped my knee on the dashboard, but that was the extent of the injury. It wasn't even an injury. They just asked, are you hurt? Well, my knee's a little funny, but, you know, it's hard to say because I'm still kind of under and I don't feel anything. So the upside was, because of the fact that I was laying back, the airbag didn't hit me in the face fresh after surgery. So I lucked out there. I walked out of this thing without a scratch. My wife, on the other hand, she's pretty banged up. She was covered in bruises for the longest time from the seat belts, just down and across, just black and blue. Her hand both of her hands were, bruised, and the swelling has finally gone down, and she's getting feeling back, and she's on the road to recovery. So I think that was on a Friday. Monday, I go back to work, and then I realize something that the doctor had said in the office when I first came out of anesthesia. He said, "We found a tumor. We're going to have it checked out. It's probably nothing." Now, we were so busy with, the accident and getting accident reports and, trying to come up with another vehicle and all that other stuff that I didn't even think about it. So Monday rolls around, it's like, tumor? What the hell are you talking about? So I called up the doctor's office, and I get, receptionist, for lack of a better term, and they tell her, I was in last Friday, and I had some surgery done. I got into a car accident, but I think I remember the doctor saying something about a tumor. I said, "Can you look into that? I really little fuzzy about everything." She's like, "Oh." So she digs out my records. Like, "I don't see anything here." And I was like, "Well, can you find out?"
Might be nice to know.
I'd kind of like to know, So she's like, "All right, I'll look into it." And then I don't hear anything for a day or two. And then she called back eventually and said that everything was fine. And apparently it was the tumor that was giving the tooth the problem. But I guess they got all out, and it really wasn't anything. And my son Connor, who's med, told me all about it, but it was a lot of medical jargon I didn't understand. But I'm safe, so here I am, untouched, unscathed. And then that was Tuesday I found out the good news, and I think Thursday we had a tornado, which are very rare out in our parts, and it missed where I was by, I think, a mile or two, but it was still pretty dicey. So I've had an interesting week.
Wow. That's a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah. It's all right. All good now. So, but besides that, I got to see the Amazing Spider-Man 2. What were your thoughts? I want to know. You're a longtime Spidey aficionado. What did you think of the movie on its own, and what did you think of the movie as part of the new franchise?
I like the movie. I mean, I go to any superhero movie, any movie in general, but, kind of superhero and action movies with the mindset of it's not the comic book. A movie is not a comic. It's being done for a completely different audience, and they're going to do some certain things different because it's being done for a completely different audience. And I need to roll with that, It's just I go to a movie and it's like, am I entertained by that movie? And
Right.
I was very entertained by the Spider-Man movie. There were certain things that I was entertained and enjoyed the Tobey Maguire movies. I like the new guy actually a little better as Spider-Man and as Peter Parker than I like Tobey Maguire.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Tobey was, even though when I watched the Tobey movies, I enjoyed them.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little whinier, to me. I think, this Spider-Man's a little more, he's got the jokiness going on, like, back in the day in the comics. I like that. I like the mechanical web shooters instead of the organic web shooters, although, again, that was not a showstopper for me in the first three movies.
Mm-hmm.
It was just I kind of rolled with it. I know they make changes and stuff, but the main thing is I think, and it works in the context of the movie, but some of the action is just so fast. It's just everything. He's moving so fast and swinging so fast. I have a hard time just tracking all the action, but then I take on the other hand, I look at it and say, well, that's actually probably realistic, as you know, as you be in a superhero movie, right? A guy swinging around on a web in spandex tights.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it makes sense in that context, and I actually like it better than if they were kind of doing slow-mo all the time or something like that. So I enjoyed it quite a lot. I liked the some of the scenes where we got to see the extra little villain set pieces. I mean, they changed Electro around quite a lot.
Right.
A little more like the Ultimate Comics version of Electro than the classic one that we're used to seeing. But again, you know, they're going to make changes. The Rhino in the big mechanical suit, you know, I rolled with it. I mean, it was a, you know, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I didn't, you know, there's things if I was of a mind to, I could have like obsessed on any number of different things in the movie and nitpicked at them and worked myself up into not liking the movie. But I choose not to do that when I go see a movie because I want to be entertained by the movie. I don't want to obsess about the little things that bug me and just get myself into a state where I feel like I wasted $10.
Right. For me, this movie, above any of the others, felt like classic Spider-Man, classic late 60s, early 70s Stan Lee Spider-Man. And I think a lot of it was the humor. I mean, because you've got to have that humor in there because that was the whole point of Spider-Man. He was just going through horrible things in his personal life, and that was his coping mechanism, was the constant quips and the jokes. And it really did feel like classic Spider-Man. And this was a Peter Parker that I actually liked instead of just kind of tolerated. Yeah, his hair is big, but other than that, he felt like Peter Parker. I mean, he really.
Yeah. You know what freaks me out is when I see these guys, all these English actors that play Americans, and you see them in an interview on a talk show and they got the English accent. That just bugs me. The same thing with Andrew Lincoln from The Walking Dead. If you ever see him in an interview and he's got this, you know, really pronounced English accent going on.
Yeah, it's that was one thing that really impressed me is being a native New Yorker. It seems like Andrew Garfield took great pains to really nail down the regional accent of Queens, New York. I mean, so much so that I guess you wouldn't have noticed it if you're not from the area, but when he spoke, it just sounded like he was from Queens, and that just lent so much authenticity to it that it really did pull you in even more. I liked the way here's something that kind of bothered me. I liked the way that the relationship between Harry and Peter played out because I felt that was important. What I didn't like is I don't think there was enough backstory. How the hell do these two guys know each other? They're obviously from different sides of the track. And we know in the comics there was a commonality because of college. You know, they went to the same college, but that was never really, you know, how did these guys meet? Or maybe that's something that could be explored in the next movie. I liked the portrayal.
Well, at least they kind of played it up where they were friends, even though they didn't go into the details.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they kind of went into the detail. Oh, we were kids together, little kids together, and stuff. That was a little hokey,
mm-hmm.
but at least they kind of established that relationship.
Right.
I didn't mind Harry as the Goblin. I liked this version of the Goblin more than the Power Ranger version of the Goblin. You know, with Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. Yeah, the transformation that he did, and there was just this one shot of him.
It's an evolution, though, right? You got to look at these movies in the context of when you're seeing them, because at the time, when the first Spider-Man movie came out with Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe, I mean, you hadn't had all these Marvel Studios movies that are just so spot-on great on capturing everything the way that kind of like you look at them and say, wow, this is how they should be doing a movie. And it was so much better than stuff we had seen before that it was like, wow, this is great. Now you go back and look at them in context of what they're putting out today, and it's like they don't necessarily stand up as well. But at the time, man, I loved that movie when it first came out.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, the opening shot with Spider-Man just falling, you know, it just fades from black and him just falling. I literally got chills watching that because, I know you don't like 3D, but I went to see this in 3D because I wanted to see what they were going to do specifically with the swinging scenes. And they really nailed it. And you really did feel like you were just swinging with them. And it was something that I wanted to see since I was a kid. You know, what's it like to be Spider-Man? Because that's his thing. You know, when he's got a lot on his mind, he'll just go out and swing just to clear his head. And you kind of get a feel of what that's like because he was having so much fun. And I think that's what people missed about this movie because it started out in bright sunshine. You're just in an up mood. He's laughing, he's joking, he's just really having fun being Spider-Man. But by the end of the movie, it's just horrible. You know, he just, going to the grave over and over and over again. It just got really dark really fast until he finally snapped out of it with the ridiculous Rhino costume, which I don't understand. I kind of get it, but I would have preferred to see the big gray suit, honestly.
Or even just like more of a exoskeleton kind of thing that wasn't so huge. But even so, I mean, Paul Giamatti, he was going a little over the top on it, but it worked. I like, you saw Vulture wings, you saw Doc Ock arms. What else did we see in that scene when he was going through when they were in that Osborn kind of area?
There was 6, but I can't remember. I remember the Vulture wings of the Doc Ock arms. And the internet is just loaded with, suppositions and guesses that, there's Craven and, I don't know. I mean,
which Sinister Six? I mean, are they going to go with the original, comic book Sinister Six, where, you're not going to have the Goblin if that's the case, which I would not mind skipping the Goblin. I don't necessarily need to see the Goblin in every single Spider-Man movie. I would love to see Doc Ock. Craven is pretty simple to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Sandman was one of the original Sinister Six, so you don't really need an Osborn enhancement for that. And I don't know, they already did the Sandman in the other movies, so I don't know if they'd want to repeat him. Mysterio would be cool to see.
Yeah, that would be the one. I mean, make him the leader.
And Electro was in the Sinister Six, so you've already got Electro, so, bringing him back, is kind of a no-brainer a little bit. I'm going to be right there. And then I wish they would keep doing the movies kind of like, not rebooting the franchise every 3 movies, Like, if you look at the X-Men side of the house, I mean, they sort of reboot it, but, Hugh Jackman has been Wolverine in, like 6 movies now or something, right? 2 Wolverine movies, the first 3 X-Men movies. I guess he had a cameo in First Class.
Yes, he did.
And now he's in Days of Future Past. It's that continuity of him as an actor. I mean, even in Days of Future Past, which I guess you haven't seen it yet, so we can talk about that another time. It was an excellent movie, but you see you see Storm in this movie, you know, and it's Halle Berry, and you see Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen as the older Professor X and Magneto, and you see James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as the younger ones. And there's this continuity of the actors in these movies, and I really enjoy that. And it's, you know, I think, you know, even Robert Downey Jr. being Iron Man in all these different movies, it kind of lends this through line to the movies. And I think these actors, they're having fun doing these movies, so they don't mind coming back and doing more of these movies, right? And you know,
and they're very well paid too. I mean, that's the key. If you're going to establish a universe, you know, you better make damn sure that everybody's on board for the long haul, or else, you know, if they come out with it's a whole new cast, that's an invitation to disaster, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I mean, you can introduce new characters, but don't, you know, flip out. But yeah, I really, I went out of the theater after Spider-Man just feeling very good about it. I'm almost at the point where I don't want Hollywood to make exact, direct translations of the comics, because I am old enough and smart enough to realize that some stuff cannot be translated. I think if Electro had come out in a yellow and green costume with big lightning bolts coming out of his head, that just would not have worked for me. It really works.
I agree with you. At the same time, they could have done, you know, they could have kind of hit a middle ground, right?
Right.
Just like, you know, you saw Captain America, the Winter Soldier, when they did Batroc, for instance. You know, he's wearing like his combat gear, but then he had that kind of purple and yellow shirt underneath, and that was just like a cool little, you know, nod to the original costume. And, you know, same thing, I don't think you needed to see him in purple and yellow spandex with the whole, you know, cowl over his head and everything like that, and the black thing and the big, you know, Snidely Whiplash mustache and everything going on. You know, you go over the top. Like when they did the Fantastic Four movie, I don't think seeing Galactus as a big dude in a purple skirt with, you know, a TV antenna coming out of his head, that would have definitely not worked. But there was probably a middle ground between that and, you know, the V'ger cloud or something, that they ended up having him be this, you know, amorphous black cloud. So, you know, I kind of like when there's a compromise somewhere in the middle between, you know, full-on comic book and full-on nothing to do with the comic book.
Right. Well, that's something that's only going to take time, and as these movies get more and more successful and make money, which they have been, we haven't really had a big flop yet. And they seem to be getting better at listening to audience feedback, especially from the comics fans. They're learning from their mistakes, and you're not going to get. Well, I shouldn't say that because they still haven't been able to do a decent Ghost Rider movie or Daredevil. But maybe
but even
try it.
Even the Ghost Rider movies, I mean, I watched those and they were okay. I mean, I won't say they're the greatest movies ever put on film, but I enjoyed them to a certain extent. You know, they were okay. And the Daredevil movie, I liked the director's cut of that far more than I liked the you know, the other one. The Elektra movie was like kind of hard to enjoy that one.
But I watched it anyway.
Yeah, I've watched it more than once.
That's
it'll come on TV or something, and you're just like, oh, what the hell, leave it on. You know, while you're doing something else.
For that reason.
Got Jennifer Garner in like a little outfit, so it's okay.
Yeah, so the only thing that kind of bothered me, and actually it really didn't bother me, but it's something I could have lived without. I really didn't need all the backstory about the Parkers because as a kid reading Spider-Man, I knew nothing about these people, and I really didn't care. You know, there was Aunt May and Uncle Ben was gone, you know, first day. So his family was Aunt May and his circle of friends, and you know, it just pulled me out of it a little bit, pulled me out of the Spidey universe to have to, you know, reconcile with Richard and Mary. And thank God did they work for Shield? I don't know. Who cares? Were they clones? I don't know. I wasn't, you know, the secret hideout in the train. Eh,
Yeah, I
you
can
know,
I can get with you on that. That was something that at least, I mean, that's kind of like the Hollywood thing where they always seem to have to make backstory and origin stuff relevant to the story that they're telling in a film. You know, they can't just tell you a story and not have it have some deep repercussions back to the past of the character. That it's got to be some script writing Bible that somebody in Hollywood is following, that this is the way to make a successful movie or something. You need to put this element in because they're always doing it.
Right, right. So the elephant in the room, as it were, and this is one of the reasons why I went with my friend Paul and the rest of the family. Paul and I, longtime Spider-Man readers. The boys and Becca, you know, they know the character, but they don't know his history, with the exception of maybe Connor. But he was so young when he read Spidey 121, he probably forgot all about it. I wanted to see the reaction to Gwen's death. So for me and Paul.
By the way, spoiler alert.
Oh yeah. It's been a couple weeks. If you haven't seen it yet, yeah, you deserve this.
To heck with you.
So, for me and Paul, walking into this movie was like walking into Titanic. We knew the story. We knew what was going to happen. It was how were they going to get there and how was it going to be handled. So, I got a little tense with the whole Brooklyn Bridge scene. And I was like, oh boy, you know, he's got "I love you" written in webs. This isn't good. And they just kind of went past that. It's like, okay, well, how are they going to do this? And then, you know, they build up to this final fight. Everything's good. Looks like the movie is winding. You hear that crazy laugh, which chills. It gave me chills hearing the guy laugh and have him come down on the flyer and grab her. And I was like, uh-oh. And then, you know, the ensuing battle and I don't know, what was it, a watchtower or something? A big clock or...
Yeah, I wasn't quite. It was like some kind of like crazy energy plant or something.
But to watch that whole thing play out, I was literally on the edge of my seat and wasn't expecting... I was totally expecting her death, but I was not expecting the way that she died, because it was... In the comics, it's always been ambiguous, sort of.
Except for that little sound effect.
Yeah. But it's the reader's interpretation. Was she dead from shock, or did that kill her? So, but there's no doubt about it. She died, and she died brutally. She just hit the concrete, and I was just like, whoa! And the whole audience just reacted at once. And that, to me, that's why you should still see movies in the theater, is to get that reaction, that visceral reaction from people around you. And then that made it worth the extra, I don't know, $4 or $5 for the 3D, for the big nice seats and everything, as opposed to just watching it on my big screen TV.
Yep.
It was handled honestly. It seemed sincere. You know, there's no going back. She's dead, and that's the way it should be. And it was powerful, I thought. And the one thing I remember about the comic is her death had a long-lasting effect on the book, for years. Peter was never quite the same after that, and hopefully they'll carry that through in the movies. I just don't want it, when
Yeah, you
Spider-Man
don't want him
comes out.
hopping around with Mary Jane going to clubs in the very next movie, right? Can they do like a movie without him having a love interest? Are they capable of doing a movie without him having a love interest? I don't know, because
They
they
set up
might
Felicia
have it
Hardy.
be like a date movie, right?
Right. I mean, do you think that Harry's assistant is Felicia Hardy?
Called her Felicia, Or did he call her Felicia, or did he call her Miss Hardy?
No, I think you just called her Felicia. They didn't give a last name, but
I was figuring.
you can see that they're setting it up like kind of like a Batman Catwoman thing.
Yeah.
So only time will tell. So other than that, I mean, it was a good movie, and I would definitely see it again and again. It's one of the few movies that I would, I can't wait for it to come out on video. I can't wait to see the director's cut, to see what was left out. There was one thing that I saw in all the trailers that they didn't have in the movie, and that was when Harry was talking to Peter and showing him that Peter was being followed by Oscorp. And, Peter says, "Why are they following me?" And Harry's was like, "Well, wasn't that the question of the day?" That scene never showed up in the movie.
Uh-huh.
Which is weird, because if Peter was being followed by Oscorp, could be where Harry started to figure out that he was Spider-Man, because by the end he obviously knew. I mean, it didn't take much, but that little extra step. So it will be interesting to see what was cut out. I know they had cast, I don't remember the actress's name, but there was a Mary Jane character in the movie, but they completely eliminated her, thank God, because I've had enough of Mary Jane. She's not one of my favorite characters, as we all know.
Skip right by Mary Jane, have him hang out with Felicia.
Yeah, bring back Doug Whitman. Well, let him go stag for a while,
Yeah, I agree.
Have Peter on Match.com. He doesn't have to have a love interest. So, I've seen that, and the other movie I saw was Godzilla.
Are you going to spoil that one for people too?
Yeah, a lot of cities get destroyed. All I'm gonna say, American cities.
I was actually, because I didn't go into it, and I don't know how much was out on the internet. I don't tend to prowl around looking at a bunch of trailers and all that kind of stuff. I was actually quite surprised by a number of things that happened in the movie.
Really?
Bryan Cranston, and do you want to go full spoiler on this? I mean, or at least semi.
Listen, let's just talk about it. I mean, we can put a spoiler alert at the beginning.
I mean, I won't go into great detail, but I mean, the fact that he didn't last in the movie for any longer than he did was somewhat surprising to me.
That very cheap and commercial, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that's red hot. He's one of the biggest stars right now, and he's an older actor. He's been around forever, and he's finally coming into his due. And hey, you want to be in a movie? We'll give you such and such dollars for this much screen time. Could the movie have gone on with him there longer? Sure. I mean, it was kind of weird.
Because he's played up so much in the publicity for the movie, and then the first quarter of the movie he's gone, right?
Right.
It's like, oh well, there he went. I mean, I didn't mind the guy who played his kid. I was also surprised that it was, although I kind of see them setting up Godzilla more as the sympathetic monster, but the fact that it was really not Godzilla versus the humans, it was Godzilla versus the Motus, right?
Right. Yeah,
You
that
know,
really caught me off guard.
yeah,
Because,
it did. You know, when you first see these other weird monsters, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I could have sworn I saw Godzilla at least in silhouette in some preview, and he didn't look like this. You know, what's the deal? You know, and then, you know, that's like, oh, well, that's not Godzilla, that's these other monsters.
yeah,
Um,
that's my
the
theory.
whole motivation for those guys was a little bit of a stretch for me,
Hmm.
but, you know, I kind of rolled with it.
Well, I'm a huge Godzilla fan. I've seen all of the movies, all 28 of them.
Wow. I don't think I've seen all 28 of them. I've seen a number of them. I couldn't tell you how many. I mean, they used to come on TV a lot, you know, on the off channels, you know, on like kind of the Saturday afternoon monster chiller horror theater kind of thing.
Yeah, but it was a founding part of your pop culture
sure.
experience as a
And I
kid.
know I've watched whenever one would come on. I mean, I know Mothra and Rodan and Mecha Godzilla and, you know, a lot of different monsters. But I was, you know, 28's actually kind of surprising to me. I didn't know there were that many Godzilla movies. I know I've seen a number of them,
Hmm.
quite a few.
Well, you couldn't help it because, like you said, they were on all the time. And the thing was, if you were flipping channels and you saw that, you stopped, and you had to, even though you'd
Yeah.
probably seen it before, you wanted to see it. Now, the thing with Godzilla is because I recently started rewatching it. Now, the first one was very dark, and it was a very well done movie, and it was just basically an allegory about, you know, Japan just being victimized in nuclear power, and people tend to forget that.
Have you
Yes.
seen both? You've seen both versions of it, right?
Right. Now, Japan has suffered through natural disasters throughout its history. You know, just country leveling earthquakes and tsunamis and all tend to wipe everything out and then they rebuild. And that's basically what Godzilla represented. He represented either the nuclear attack by the Americans or massive earthquakes or tsunamis. He's a force of nature. He comes in, destroys, and it helps assuage their guilt. And because Godzilla was sent to kill the Japanese that deserve to die, so they say. So it's very deep and it's very dark. And then somewhere along the line, when Gamera, from a different company, became popular with the kids because he was a protect children, that's when Godzilla made his shift, and his appearance changed. He became more cat-like and less reptilian, and was strictly there to fight monsters. And it struck me as weird that that's where they went initially. That's their start point. It's like he's the savior of the world, king of the monsters. So right off the rip, they're thinking franchise. So
Yeah.
there's no, gentle lead-in. It's just going to be Godzilla versus whoever's next. And how this is going to play out, I don't know, because, my kids didn't grow up with Godzilla on TV all the time like I did. So when they
How
got
did
to
they like
see
the
it,
movie, though?
they
I mean, it did really well in the box office.
yeah,
A lot of
Hollywood
people went
liked
and
it.
saw it. It seemed to have had fairly good buzz and good reviews in general. It wasn't panned by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I think just by nature of who Godzilla is, it's going to do well because it's going to be a family film in a kind of twisted way. You're going to go there and you're going to bring your kids along, and it's not a date movie, although it could be. I don't know. But the kids liked it. I really liked it, just because I'm such a fan that I think this is the first time that I've seen a legitimate Godzilla that wasn't wearing a rubber suit. And I say that because I saw the one back in '99, and I almost walked out of the theater.
Really?
That was
I
not
didn't
Godzilla.
mind the one. I didn't mind that one that much. I watched it. I thought it was okay.
I hated it. I would have loved it if they called it something else. But there was nothing Godzilla-like about it. You know? Where's the atomic breath? That's what you need.
Well, you did get that near the end, which actually was very cool. It was probably one of the cooler scenes. I wish he would have used it a little more. You know,
Yeah, that was a cool scene. You see his
Yeah.
spin start to light up, and the people in the audience that know what's coming. You can hear the excitement. Like, uh-oh, here it comes. And then I thought there was the one part where he's fighting, and I thought he was going to rip the jaw open like King Kong. No, he's going to breathe atomic fire down your mouth.
I would have liked to see a little more Godzilla versus the Motu action. I think they were a little sparse on the actual fights, and a lot more nighttime. You know, that's kind of a cheat a little bit, I think, so they can kind of make it look, maybe they don't have to spend as much on the special effects. I'm not sure what the actual motivation is to have that stuff always happen at night instead of in the light of day. It seems like special effects are good enough that they could easily have had that look credible in broad daylight where you'd be able to see what was going on a little bit better.
Yeah, I noticed that in Pacific Rim also. There was a lot of night shots and a lot of underwater shots. We should probably ask Tom Martinick. He would know.
Yeah.
Tom, if you're watching, get hold of me and find out. Yeah, you're definitely right. But maybe for the next one, maybe he's out in the desert. It's nice and bright. I shouldn't say they did it with Transformers. They had them fighting out in broad daylight, and it looked good.
I know they can do it. I mean, it's possible. That's why I'm just curious as to why it was mostly kind of nighttime, poorly lit, scenarios. That was the one thing just kind of around the internet that I seem to see cropping up most from people, and to me, it wasn't something that made me not enjoy the movie, but it was when people are griping about it, I kind of step back and say, yeah, I can see that. It would have been nice to have seen, a little better lighting on some of those scenes.
Yeah, it's almost like they purposely held back on showing them. They waited for the big reveal towards the last act of the movie, which is, whatever. But why not just have the fight start in the middle of the movie?
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of, like, we saw Las Vegas destroyed. No, we saw the aftermath of the Motu going through Las Vegas and destroying. We didn't see any actual destruction. And I'm wondering if that's, a ratings thing. Because there's a lot of collateral damage, but you don't actually see it.
Right.
And I'm wondering if
that's like when Metropolis gets toasted in Man of Steel in the Zod. I mean, they're actually hitting each other through buildings and stuff. But I mean, it looks like a atom bomb went off in that place, and and it was during a work day because people were in offices and stuff, right? Tens of thousands of people had to have died.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you knock down office buildings in a densely populated urban scenario during a workday, right? And you don't kill tremendous numbers of people.
But
the same thing. It's like
you saw them running into the buildings. You saw the buildings falling. To me, that's different than just here's a helicopter shot of what just happened.
Right.
Like, don't show me that. I want to see them jumping up on buildings and then collapsing under it.
Well, like Las Vegas. I don't know if you've been to Las Vegas at some point in your life, right?
Only on a layover.
Okay, well, anyone who's been to Las Vegas I don't care what time of the day or night you're in Las Vegas. I don't care what day of the year you're in Las Vegas. Every one of those casinos on the Strip has got thousands and thousands and thousands of people in it at any given point of time. I don't care what time it is. So when you see that devastation that happened, you know, kind of right through the heart of some of those famous hotels on the Strip, there is no way that tens of thousands of people were not crushed under rubble or, you know, seriously injured and death and all kinds of things by just, you know, I mean, an earthquake that went through would kill, you know, that knocked down buildings like that, actually physically takes out buildings. You know, people are going to get trapped under rubble, and you're going to have just cleanup efforts that go on for a tremendous period of time.
Right. The thing that really got me was the fight scene in San Francisco, because that's one of the few cities on the West Coast that I've actually been to on multiple occasions. So, you know, to see these monsters prowling around Chinatown, and I had been there recently, you know, it's just kind of weird. It gives me the chills to think about it. But yet, there wasn't a single body.
Yeah.
You know, all that destruction.
Well, that's because it's a PG-13 movie, right? And they want to keep you had like dead bodies laying everywhere, you know. I don't think that would be a PG-13 movie anymore. That's going to kick it up a notch, right?
Yeah, 3 gigantic monsters fighting on Fisherman's Wharf. And, you know.
You just see, like, you know, they've just got, like, about 10,000 CGI corpses, you know, all this blood everywhere, dismembered bodies, all this kind of stuff. No.
That's what they should do. They have a different
there
version,
you go.
like you know, an R-rated version for grown-ups.
Yeah, but, you know, that's a lot of revenue that goes down the drain, right? The second you give it that R rating.
Oh, yeah, well, they were tracking the monsters, so they evacuated everybody on time, because we all know how good evacuations go.
Yeah. Ask the people in New Orleans about that, right? They would have all been in that state, like at the end where they're all in that stadium. And I like the fact that in these movies, right, this huge disaster happens, all this devastation, and the major characters seem to just like wander up to one another in the midst of all this carnage, and just like happen to find each other. You know, if you were at a ball game at that stadium and you and Becca did not have a prearranged let's meet at this place at this time, there is no way you would find each other amongst the 50,000 people that are at that ballpark just watching a ball game, and all the havoc that went on after this. This looked like they just walk up and, hey, you know, there's the exact person I was looking for.
We lost each other at a department store over the weekend.
Yeah.
I was up in the men's department helping Devin buy a suit. She was down in shoes, and then somehow we switched places, and, you know, we're trying to text each other. We're just missing each other. This went on for, like, you know, almost an hour. We couldn't find each other. I can't imagine, you know, you add 100,000 people next.
Yeah.
And it was very well organized there at the stadium.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, you know, everybody was pretty sedate, considering. Well, the world's falling around us, but
didn't have anybody shivving each other for a can of beans or anything.
Yeah. But like you said, and just watching Godzilla get up at the end and shuffle off into the water. Hey, kids, we'll see you back in the next one.
It was, you know, it had its contrivances that you need to have in these movies. You accept those things, and you sit back and say, was I thoroughly entertained, you know, for a couple hours, that I forget what was going on in the outside world for the time that I was in that theater with the lights down? And my answer was yes. I forgot the world outside. I enjoyed the movie. You know, it was a successful movie. That's what I paid my money for.
Yep. I do the same thing. It's just like, did I just waste $16? Did I waste that money? And in this case, no. because I don't go to the theater that often just for that reason. It's like, if I'm going to go to a theater, if I'm going to go to the trouble of spending that money, I want my money's worth, and I want the experience to be good, and I want my family to enjoy it. And so far, this year, this has been a big year. There's been a lot of movies out there, and we're not even halfway through.
Oh, no. I mean, you're going to go see X-Men, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing nothing but good things about it.
It was really good. I mean, I guess the only people I've heard that had problems with it are like really super hardcore X-Men fans. Some of them, they just like, it needs to be a certain way, or it really, you hear this, oh, it took me out of the movie completely when, this character didn't act the way that, their powers dictate that they should act in the comic books or something. And it's like, well, it's not a comic book, it's different, so they switch things around a little bit. It's going to happen.
If Ben Whelan says,
that's a sure ticket to not enjoying a superhero movie, is if you are so attached to the comic books on the printed page that it's going to really take you out of the movie and disturb you if it's not just like the printed comic book, because I guarantee it's not going to be. So, don't waste your money. Just.
When Len Wein says it's one of the best comic book movies that he's seen, I gotta, right. It's for live.
Yeah.
All right.
It was a good movie.
You might be onto something. Yeah, but I can't. Yeah, you're right. You can't sit there, with your iPad looking at a digital copy of Days of Future Past, going, scene by scene, panel by panel. It's like, oh, they did that wrong. Nope, they did that wrong. Nope, that's the wrong angle. And I know there's people out there like that. I feel bad for them.
Yeah, and it's not just comic book movies either. I mean, I see lots, different action movies, and some of the things that I'll hear people complain about, it's like, man, I really feel bad that you can't just go and enjoy a movie. It's just like, if it's not like this I feel the same way when I read certain comic books, It's just like, people, like, they get very, very spun up if things aren't a certain way, and it's like, well, that didn't bother me that much. That's not to say there aren't comic books I don't enjoy, but when there's comic books I don't enjoy, I stop reading them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually I had a big entry into that realm lately.
Wow, which was?
I have completely stepped away from DC New 52.
Come on, why would you do something like that?
Well, it's not, and I don't think they're bad comics. I'm not going to say that DC is terrible. I don't think they are. For some reason, they're not clicking with me. Yesterday, I read a big stack of DC New 52 comics. I had picked up a whole bunch of them that I had stopped reading over the past 6 months or so on Free Comic Book Day. They have sales at a lot of the shops, and I picked up a lot of New 52 books out of dollar bins. And, so I probably had about 30 New 52 books from 15 to 20 different series. Justice League Dark, Justice League 3000, Green Lantern, Constantine, Aquaman, all different kinds. And I was on Facebook, and I read them, and they were mostly mediocre to me. Again, it doesn't mean that somebody, I know a lot of people that are reading these same comics and they love them. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with the comic. It's just how I'm enjoying the comic, right? I read them, and to me they were all fairly mediocre, right? Mm-hmm. So I was talking to Mike Myers, who does the DC Noise podcast. I was on Facebook messaging with. Mike Myers, who does the DC Noise and Geek Brunch podcast, and he was mentioning that he has really been digging comics lately, and that most of the comics he reads from all different publishers are all 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 books. And so I mentioned, I just, read a whole bunch of DC comics yesterday, New 52, and probably the highest grade I would have given any of them personally was a 3 out of 5.
Wow.
There were a lot of 2.5 out of 5s. I don't think any, maybe a couple 2 out of 5s, but not that many. But, it's just I wasn't enjoying them. And, in fact, a lot of them I was just struggling to make it through the comic book. I mean, some of them I was just skimming them.
That's a horrible feeling, yeah. Yeah,
I was skimming them by the second half of the book, and it's just like, man, I'm not digging these comics. And, Mike comes back to me and he says, you need to just stop reading DC comics. He said, I think they're great, but that doesn't mean that you need to think that they're great. And I felt like John Belushi and the Blues Brothers when that beam of light hits him, and he's, Jesus H, tap dancing Christ, I have seen the light. And I just had this moment that, you know what? I don't need to read those comic books. I still love a lot of the Vertigo books that are coming out, but the New 52 stuff, I don't need to read them. So I went out to the DCBS, Discount Comic Book Service. May order wasn't closed until the 28th. The ones that I was kind of just holding on to out of momentum, took them off my order.
Wow.
Gone. Done. I'll revisit it next time they reboot the universe. But for right now, I mean, I read so many comics, and there's a lot of comics that I just genuinely enjoy. So many comics. I mean, the Marvel comics that are coming out, I don't like all of them, but, there's 20 or so Marvel comics I really enjoy. Lots and lots of indie books I really, really enjoy, and just the DC was not doing it for me. Again, no angry letters, please. I mean, if you dig DC, that's great. I love DC in general. I love their characters. I love their history. All those old DC comics are still there for me. I will concentrate on DC back issues for a while. But the new stuff, I'm going to stick to Vertigo and some of the video game adaptions, which are like, the Injustice Gods Among Us, I really enjoy. And I've been digging, like, the Batman 66, which is set in the TV series universe, is fun.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite.
And they're doing one that's coming out that's Batman 66 Green Hornet. That's starting in a month or two. So, that's what my DC output's going to be for a good long while, I think, is just I'll stick to Vertigo and that other stuff. And, people who dig it, I think that's great. There's too many people I know that I respect their opinions about things that really love the current Batman series, Green Lantern, all these, and I think that's great. I can't enjoy them for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was going to ask, can you put your finger on what it is? Is it just that the stories aren't compelling, or there's just too much product now, or what do you think it is?
Really what it is, I think, is that there is a... they made a lot of changes when they made the New 52 that, to me, seem like they were needless changes, but I don't think they were needless. I think that they did them very purposefully to shake things up, to appeal to a new audience, and it's just, I'm not that audience. They changed aesthetically, I dislike the redesigned costumes. It's like movie costumes. We talked about, they got all these lines all over them, and they're just very busy. And I think it's like, in a movie, I just, I sit and I watch the movie and things are moving around. It's like, I'm not staring at a close-up of this horrible Green Lantern costume, or, the Spider-Man's got all the little hexagons all over it.
Yeah.
It just, but on the printed page, when they take the costume and it's very busy, it doesn't appeal to me, and that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it doesn't appeal to me, because again, I know a lot of people think they're cool. You know, for some reason, also, this is indicative of when they make statues and toys. They tend to use like these metallic paints on them instead of like the regular primary paints, kind of like shiny. Doesn't do anything for me. Just not digging it. So, you know, it's like, why beat my head against it? I just step aside and, you know, maybe it's just some rough patch I'm going through with DC, and I look at it again in a couple of years. If I actually do step away, I can enjoy it again at some point down the line. But
couple of years, you'll be back in 6 months.
I don't know. I mean, the other thing is, there's these relentlessly bleak stories.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you always have bad guys in stories and, you know, stuff, but DC, they do these events where, you know, like Forever Evil, and it's just like the villains take over the Earth, and it's like everybody is, you know, the Earth is devastated, and the bad guys are all doing this, and now they got this new one coming up, Future's End, and it's this bleak future where Brother Eye has taken over, and they have to struggle their way out of it, and it's like, this is like unrelentingly depressing reading these comics, and it's like they go from one event to the next. There's not even a breather where things are, you know,
normal.
I felt similar when Marvel was going through that phase where it was like all the villains were at the forefront. I was kind of pulling away from Marvel, and then when they did the the Heroic Age and Marvel Now and all this kind of stuff, the stories just seem like they're a little more upbeat. And I enjoy that a little more. So I don't know. I am, but my roots are in Marvel too. You know, I read Marvel first, so maybe it's just kind of going back to that, because I was kind of a latecomer to some extent to the DC universe. I mean, I came into the DC hard in the late '70s, which long time ago, but it was, you know, 7 or 8 years after I started reading Marvel comics.
For me it was, I started with Marvel. Marvel captured my heart. But I also read DC, but I think it was just because it was there and I had some familiarity with the characters through other media. I mean, if I hadn't have seen, you know, the Superman Aquaman hour, I doubt if I would have read DC, other than Batman. I mean, but Marvel are the books that I actively sought out month after month. If there happened to be a DC book, you know, a 100-page Supergiant just sitting there, yeah, what the heck? It's a quarter. Why not? But I didn't seek out DCs until later on. And then, yeah, it wasn't until probably the early 80s where I really actively, all right, now I'm collecting both. You know, probably not until the New Teen Titans. Because up until then, I mean, there really wasn't much out.
That was a big swing, right? I mean, the New Teen Titans, when that came out, and, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they, you know, that era, I was buying almost everything DC, and then just kind of out of attrition, I mean, not attrition, I mean, just out of habit. You know, once you start buying them all, you kind of just get in the habit until they do something to shake it up. And I think that they shake things up because they want to get new readers in. Right. But at the same time, they run the risk of chewing away some of the old readers, and as long as they get more new readers than old readers they lose, then that's a net positive. And, you know, bottom line, I don't think the publisher gives a crap whether I personally read DC Comics or not. I mean, it's like, if I stop reading DC Comics because they do the New 52 and 10 other people start reading DC Comics, then they're happy, right? Right. Well, I mean, the thing is like, I was buying 50 DC comic books a month, So it's going to take 10 people buying 5 or 6 DC comic books a month to make DC the same amount of money as losing me. But, you know, a lot of people who are hardcore DC fans, they are still hardcore DC fans. You know, John Mayo and Mike Myers, I mean, they were buying every single DC comic book pretty much before the New 52, and they're still pretty much buying every single. So I'm not as big of a DC fan as those guys were, because they weathered this and they came out the other side and they're still loving it. And, you know, more power to them. That, you know, they are still enjoying these books, and, you know, say, I love these books and they're great stories, and it's like, I think that's great. You know, I'm going to read these things over here that I think are great, and we're both happy. I guess I kind of felt like I should be reading these things because other people were enjoying them, but I just like, you know what? I don't have to like the same things that everyone else likes, and I no longer have a run that I have to keep continuous because they rebooted everything to #1, so it's not like, you know, I have Batman from issue like about 160 through the last issue of Batman, you know, and I have every issue of Superman from that to the end. And then they restarted them all, and it's like, well, you know what, that's something else, and that I don't have that run, you know, well, I only stopped that run after 15 to 20 issues or so, so it's not, I didn't have the years of collecting built into it.
Right.
They made it easier for me, which is, I think, good. You know, I don't know if the collector sickness in my soul would have let me drop Batman if it was issue 800 or 879.
Right.
You know,
no, it wouldn't have. It wouldn't have, because
I would not have been able to stop getting Batman.
Right.
I would not have stopped getting Detective. I would not have stopped getting, you know, some of these series that they've rebooted a number of times over the years. It just kind of like flips that switch in your head. But I don't think there are that many people like that anymore that collect comics. I mean, people just read trade paperbacks. They read digital. You know, just like, hey, I just want to read the stories, and
yeah,
man, I'm thankful to some extent. You know, they've cold turkey helped me kick the habit, get that collector monkey off my back by canceling every single title that had a lengthy historical legacy to it. Not only did they restart the title, but they completely redid the continuity and everything, so it's not even the same character anymore. So it's like, this isn't even the same guy that I was reading before, you know? So I kind of feel like somebody who read every Alan Scott Green Lantern story and loved Alan Scott, and then they retwizzled it and made Hal Jordan the scientific Green Lantern, and it's like, did those people feel the need to read Hal Jordan Green Lantern if they weren't loving the stories? No, it's like it's a different guy.
Right. You're absolutely right about the collector's disease, because when you have those long runs, and you know the books that are out there with the long runs, you knew exactly what issue number you were missing.
Yep.
You know, I'm missing Spider-Man 176. I know that right now, and I know that to be true. And I could get it at any time, but I'd rather just find it serendipitously, because that's my collector thing. I don't like an easy
the thrill search. Of the hunt.
Yes, exactly. Before we go, I want to ask you a question. Now, we've got Guardians of the Galaxy coming out.
Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka.
I know I'm going to go see it because it's a Marvel movie.
I have been rocking out to Blue Swede because of that movie, man.
But my thing is, it's not my Guardians.
Yeah.
Hold on. There it is.
Pulling out Marvel superheroes?
Many years ago, my father bought me this.
Oh, yeah.
I treasure this book. And this isn't the same guy. It is a name, but but I'm going to go see the movie anyway. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, there's a lot of buzz about Rocket Raccoon.
I love Rocket Raccoon, man.
Gonna be
Rocket Raccoon and Groot are the draws of that movie for me.
right, and for a lot of people, and I would anticipate, not unfairly so, that maybe Rocket Raccoon would get his own movie at some point. Which
As long
begs
as he's
the
with
question:
Groot.
do you think it's time? Are we ready for a reboot of Howard the Duck?
You know, I don't know what the half-life on that radioactive waste is.
I mean, it's obvious we can CGI them, we can make them look good visually. I'm sure the movie could be great. It's just a matter of the writing. Now,
You know, they would have to come up with an angle, and here's the thing. The Guardians are not your Guardians of the Galaxy, okay? But they rebooted Guardians of the Galaxy 6 years ago-ish. I don't know exactly the year it was, but, you know, Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, they did this Marvel Cosmic thing. They did the new Guardians of the Galaxy, had the big crossovers, you know, Annihilation, and, you know, a lot of big storylines. And that's, you know, they pulled in the Gamora that was slightly different from the Gamora that was back in the old Starlin books, and Drax, slightly different. You know, you had Rocket Raccoon and Groot. You had the Peter Quill Star-Lord was different than the Star-Lord that, you know, you've obviously got there. And these comics were, in the comic book reader world, exceptionally successful. I mean, it revitalized that whole franchise. People really dug them. It brought the characters back to the forefront, which is why Hollywood actually decided they wanted to make a movie with these characters. You know, so they had found a voice for these characters that resonated with the fan base that was reading comic books. Now, I think what Marvel Studios has been successful with is taking something that is successful with the fan base and slightly tweaking it to make it, you know, and why I think they've been successful with their movies is they've got some smart people who are able to keep the core elements of these properties that made them successful with the comic book readers and translate those over onto the film, and then bring in, you know, enough the differences and the changes in the film that make them also resonate somewhat with the, not even somewhat, very well, I think, in many cases, with the film audience. And then, you know, they get both those things together. Now, on Howard the Duck, I don't think that it's impossible, but they have not found the secret sauce in the comic books to bring Howard back, right? So until that happens, until they can have a successful Howard the Duck comic book and find some kind of spin that's going to be resonating with a modern audience, I don't know that they can take that and bring it to film.
I'd like to see them try.
Yeah, I mean, the last Howard series was, I don't think it did well. I
couldn't get through, I think, one or two issues. It was just, the problem is that is a character that is so intrinsically linked to the writer. I mean, you have to have either Steve Gerber or Bill Mantlo writing it. That's it. Because any other writer, it just falls flat. Unless there's somebody new out there that would be willing to give it a shot.
There are a lot of good writers out there that could find a voice for that character. They just haven't found the right guy. And I think, you know, what you're looking at there is those writers just clicked with the character, and they had a passion for that. You know, one of them created the character, and, you know, the other one, I think, just really dug the character. So they were able to do a spin on it where that enthusiasm for the character, I think that shines through to the audience. I mean, you can kind of tell when this is what, I won't say it's always the case, but, you know, I think you can tell when a creative team is just loving working on a book.
Yeah. Oh,
you know,
yeah.
it kind of shines through in the book. That's not to say that, you know, if you don't like something, that it means that, you know, they're phoning it in or something. It could just mean that you're not clicking with the character, right? But I think you can tell. I notice it myself when you're reading a book and you kind of don't enjoy it, and then you read on some interview or online site that there was a lot of editorial interference on the book, and, you know, a lot of mandates of, like, them telling the creators, you got to change this, you got to do things a different way, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay. I'm guessing those guys were not having that good of a time if they're actually on some news site talking about how much some editor was, you know, peeing in their iced tea while they were, you know, making this comic book. So you can kind of imagine that they probably weren't having that great of a time while they were writing that book. And then you kind of look, and I didn't enjoy that book either, so maybe there's a connection.
So there is hope. There is hope. Let's put out a call to all the great writers out there. I might even put something up on Facebook.
There you go.
Well, I want to see Howard on the big screen. I only said it because I've been rereading it lately, and it was such a good book. And a lot of it went over my head when it first came out because it was just so deep. But I think the timing is just about right to see a reboot for Howard. So with that, let's just call it a night because I got to get up and go to work tomorrow. I'm never going to get used to this time thing. You're early evening where you are.
8:16. I'm just like, woohoo! Hours to go before I sleep. I've got reviews that were turned in today by guys writing reviews for ComicSpectrum.com, and I gotta edit those and get them ready for publication. By the way, if anyone listening is interested in writing reviews for ComicSpectrum.com, I am always interested in reviewers. So you can send me an email at bob@ComicSpectrum.com. You can talk a little bit about the review guidelines and stuff. Go out to the site and check out the reviews. You know, mostly I want somebody to write a review with their own voice, but I do like everyone to adhere to our standardized rating guidelines, right? Which, to me, it's like I like them to letter grades. You know, 5 is an A, 4 is a B, 3 is a C. If you give something to 2, it means it's a failing grade. So, you know, if you give something to 2, you got to think, if somebody turned this into my creative writing class, would I actually give the guy a D for it?
I may take you up on that.
And sometimes I would, right? And, you know, for you, I have a section where we do back issue reviews. You know, if you want to write a review, I had one of my guys did a back issue review that just went up yesterday of Planet of the Vampires #1 from Atlas Comics. And you know, I love you know, we've had back issue reviews go up of, you know, Creepy and Eerie magazine, and, you know, Gotham by Gaslight by Mike Mignola. Lots of stuff, and we do collected edition reviews, webcomic reviews, digital comic reviews.
Maybe
you could do a review of Marvel Preview Presents Star-Lord. That would be great.
All right, we'll talk.
Any of that stuff. I just love sharing the love about comics.
Yep. So everybody go to Spectrum.com, check it out. Check out we have a channel, the Piles Online Power Hour on YouTube. Tomorrow, I'll send you the link.
A page on Comic Spectrum with links to the podcasts we've been doing.
Yep, sounds good. Alrighty. So that's it for this week, and we'll see you next week. And I think next week we'll talk about the X-Men, because I want to see if it's as good as everybody's saying it is. All right, Bob. Say good night.
Good night, everyone.